Welcome back to another episode of the School of Why podcast. Today, I'm joined with one of my good friends and the burnout avoidance authority person in America right now. Erin, you are just crushing it because, quite frankly, the problem is so big that you're trying to solve. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm always happy to chat about this. And of course, always happy to see your face.
What? Yes. Okay. So you and I are fellow vigilante thought leaders trying to take on huge problems in this country and help one organization and maybe conference or person at a time do that. So Erin, for those of you who don't know, is a thought leader like myself. And she was nice enough to give us some time today. So I'm super excited. Erin, walk us through a quick journey of how did you become this, thought leader authority specifically around burnout. I know that you've got a long history with helping organizations and people through that. And now it's interesting. I find that some of these people that are experts in certain areas, the timing is just kind of happened where all of a sudden this thing that was not a real hot topic 5 years ago is front and center. So tell us tell us a little quick journey. How did you become this authority specifically around burnout?
Well, funny enough, I burnt out myself. I mean, crazy story, but I actually burnt out myself. I have always been a mover, a shaker, a leader, a doer, an overachiever, somebody that's constantly wanting to achieve, wanting to do more, setting ridiculous goals for myself, and then figuring out a way to make them happen. And so that is just naturally who I am. That has always been who I've been. And so I've gotten ahead in my career and in life by working harder, doing more, going to the conferences, reading the books, schmoozing, putting in the hard yards. And what's interesting is that all of those things that make us successful early on in our career are actually the very things that end up causing us to burn out. And so that is what I was grappling with, was like, okay, I've done all these things and like, I've gotten to this level. I've worked my way into achieving whatever I've wanted to, but it's also caused me to burn out. And so I spent the last 6 years heading up marketing for the largest healthcare staffing company in the country. And as you can imagine, doing that during a pandemic was a little stressful.
What a nightmare.
So we had over 50,000 clinicians working for us for any at one time. We worked with thousands of hospitals all over the country. So, we were dealing with a lot of people that were stressed out and burnt out. And then myself and my team and all of my colleagues, we were all just burnt out. And so, also at the same time, I had all these other things going on in my life. I'd been through 4 failed rounds of IVF. My husband's dad died. We had to put our dog down. Like, it was just one thing after another. And so it was this huge culmination of just stress at work, a lifetime of prioritizing achievement over rest, and then all of these other things happening in my personal life. And I just totally burnt out. And I was really somebody that thought burnout was like total BS.
Yeah, for the week.
I'm like, dude, take a nap.
Stop being a wimp. Yeah, step it up. He didn't get enough spankings when he was a kid. Let's do this.
Yeah, you're burnt out. Give me a break. Get your life together. So that was totally my thought.
What are you doing, Snowflake? Let's go.
Yeah. And then it happened to me and I'm like, okay, I can't just yoga my way out of this. I can't just nap my way out of it.
Breathing exercises your way out of it.
I'm like, I actually have to make some changes. Nothing is going to change unless I change it. And so I really, for the last few years, dug deep on researching burnout, studying burnout, doing interviews with people from all over the world, high achievers, surveying thousands of people, obviously looking into the clinicians and their burnout. So really just took all of that and boiled it down now into 3 main steps that I talk about in my keynote. So that's kind of the short.
That's great. That's great. I love that. And this is so important because there's so many different ideas out there right now on how do you solve this burnout issue, because the burnout, it goes deep and now it's really getting exasperated, because if you weren't burnt out before, now you're competing with machines that have the, cognizance or the information of 5 billion people in 3 seconds. So there's that. And so it's interesting. And I actually do want to ask you a little bit about this, the whole AI generative like explosion. I was on CNBC 2 weeks ago on Wall Street doing an interview, which was really neat.
I saw that.
Yeah. So what it is though, is like, it's like, what do we do? What do the humans do? Well, and first and foremost, we take it very, very seriously. Right. And I think with you, with burnout, it's the same thing. It's like, we've got to take this seriously. And something that I always look at in this is like, okay, so I'm a company, I'm looking at the human aspect, right? So it's like first thing is, well, how do we drive revenue? Right. And then the second thing is, how do we drive profitability? And then somewhere in there, it's like, how do we get rid of employee churn? Because it's expensive to retrain people. And then what's not as talked about, because it's harder to measure, is the trillions of dollars that get lost in people's lack of engagement. And I got to assume that that's partly what you drop into, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I do a couple different keynotes, and some of them are a little bit more focused on like employee sustainability and retention, and some are more focused on the individual. But yeah, I mean, we have to put the human first. If we don't put the human first, we have no business. Like we have to care about our people, and people that feel seen and heard and understood and empowered to take time off. I mean, perfect example. I worked at my company for 6 years, which meant that I was eligible to take a 3-month full pay leave of absence to deal with my burnout.
Okay.
Did I take it? No, of course I didn't.
No.
Why? Because
Fear.
I was like, what is everyone going to think?
Yeah.
What's my boss going to think about me? I had 65 people on my team. What are they going to think about me?
Right.
What are my
Who's going to pass me up? Like, what am I going to miss?
How do I come back from this? Especially because nothing was really wrong with me. Like I was burnt out. And so there's this whole culture that's just not being talked about of like, nobody thinks it's okay to take the time off. We have to empower our people and let them know that they're allowed to take time off, that these days, this PTO, and sick days, you don't have to be like on death's doorstep to take a sick day. You can take a wellness day, have a staycation, go to the beach on a nice day, like have a wellness day.
Yeah. So type A, you talk about the type A trap a lot. And it's like, okay, so that's what a lot of us fall into. People that excel as executives, leaders, entrepreneurs. A lot of these people are people that are type A personalities, not always, but probably more than 50%. And so we just think that like, okay, cool. More of that is how I continue to level up. And you do get to a point where you hit a ceiling where more is not better. And that's a huge thing that I think a lot of people that kind of naturally progress into leadership and executives and maybe running their own company that you have to really learn is that sometimes less is how you get to the next level, which is really bizarre. But so how do you interact? So the big theme, I think, for most people, whether they realize this or not, is that they're afraid. There's a fear of either losing something that they have or not gaining something they deserve or think they need to have. Yeah. So that fear, do you do a lot of work around that? Is that a focus for you? Is how do you cope with that fear?
A little bit. I mean, one of the things that I talk about is redefining your definition of success. And I think that is something that so often is ingrained so deep in who we are. And it's something that starts as children. I know for myself, I have always looked at success as achieving and accomplishing. Like if I don't accomplish something, if I'm not accomplishing something one day, I feel like I've been useless that whole day. And, if I really dig deep and go back to where that started, I grew up with a brother who was like the hot guy. I mean, every girl wanted to date him. Every guy wanted to be him. He was the guy. I was just his invisible little sister.
He old?
Yeah, 2 years older. And then my best friend who's still my best friend since 4th grade, was like this knockout. Okay. I mean, gorgeous. Everywhere we went, all eyes were on her. Yeah. Nobody was looking at me. We'd walk into a bar. The only reason guys would come talk to me is because they wanted to know about my friends. So I grew up in this environment where I never felt like I was like the hot friend or like the good looking one. And I just always felt like the ugly duckling. And I think from a very young age, I started realizing that like, if I just accomplished stuff, if I achieved stuff, I would get attention. I would feel good about myself. I would feel like I had value.
Was
And
he
so
the
it started.
firstborn, if I might ask?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just
Okay,
the
so
two of
you
us.
and I are in
Yeah.
the same boat. I'm a secondborn. It's the curse of the secondborn. Like, how do I figure out how to overcompensate somewhere else? I had a brother similar, right? Like
Exactly.
valedictorian, all-star of every sport, like all this and that stuff. And it took me a while to kind of figure out what I was going to do that was like totally different, you know? And I completely relate to that, but we do take it too far.
Yeah. And so for my whole life, I've always felt like achievement and accomplishment was the thing that gave me value, that made me feel good about myself. And at some point, you just achieve, but at what cost? You're so broken. You're so broken and unhealthy that you can't enjoy that success. And so I have really had to do some deep, what is the word?
Digging.
Yeah.
You have to
Say that
do
3 times
deep
fast.
digging. Yeah.
Yeah.
Deep digging.
I had to do some deep digging to really realize that I need to reevaluate and redefine my definition of success. It can't just always be about achievement.
100%.
Maybe it's happiness. Maybe it's having flexibility in my schedule where I'm not working 20 hours a day. Maybe it's having time to go have happy hour with my parents at 4 o'clock, like, because it's Tuesday and I feel like it.
Well, it's like, what are we working for anyway? I talk a lot about that, especially in my second book. If you don't break your own why, it'll break you. Right. And so, and my whole thing is about how do you hack and rebuild strategic emotions for authentic success? So your redefining of success, I talk a lot about that in my second book. And it's about, I've kind of boiled it down to like authentic success, meaning that like, if I'm not putting authenticity of at forefront, which includes like, what am I at the core? Like, who am I and why am I here? And if I'm not thinking about those things on a daily basis, nobody else is going to think about that for me. Right? Yeah. They're going to just be like, cool, what can I get from you? And so as long as you stay in that weird, rigid, linear, quantitative only type of mindset, you will break eventually. Now, young people don't know that yet because they haven't tested it out. So there's a lot of young people that are just like in this hustle culture right now. And they're thinking, if I just hustle faster than the next person, I'm going to win. And you do. Yeah. That's what kind of climbs up some stuff. Yes.
Yeah.
But when you realize that what life is about, that moment where all of a sudden you as a human start realizing what life really matters and you're still on this other thing, that right there is where shit gets real weird.
Well, and it's not just that. It's your health may give you the wake up call. It may not just be the realization of, oh, why am I doing all this? It might be, oh shit, I just got diagnosed with cancer. I can't run.
Yeah.
Or, I had a heart attack. I mean, I know people who literally dropped dead at like 47 that looked, they were like an Adonis. They were in great shape, looking like working out, eating healthy, not overweight, not smoking, all the things. And then they just dropped dead. And
that's why I don't stop smoking. That's exactly why I don't stop smoking. Because I don't want to be like those guys.
But I mean, even myself, like my fertility journey is so intertwined with my burnout journey because I was working so many hours. I was under so much stress. I had an incredibly demanding job, an incredibly demanding boss. Right. And I had all of this stress, and I wasn't able to have children. And that is something that
that's a wake-up call.
Struggle with every single day. And, my husband's 45, I'm 42. We've done 4 rounds of IVF, 2 transfers. We're now using an egg donor. Just last week, I found out one of our transfers didn't work. So, I mean, like, we're still all in this.
And you're not alone. Like your story with IVF is just very common now. I mean, it's so common. Sadly. And it's crazy,
And I mean, part of it is, yes, people are having kids later. I'm not saying that that's not unimportant, but so much of it is also stress. And I was under so much stress during those really pivotal years when I because having children.
And I think we all think like that. Like I've been looking, I want to lose an extra 10 or 15 pounds, right? So I've been looking at a shot that can get that done. And now because there's this technology that can help us have a baby or lose some weight or God knows what else it can do, we just are like, perfect. Now we've solved how to check that box while we're still checking all the other boxes, thinking like, okay, we'll be fine. And when it fails, it's like, whoa, okay. What am I doing here?
And so I ask people, I'm always in my talks, I'm always like, what's it going to take? before you realize that you've got to shift your thinking on this. Will it take a heart attack? Will it take a miscarriage, a cancer
Right.
diagnosis, a divorce, getting fired? Like, what is that thing that's going to
Oh
shock you
yeah.
into realizing that I got to take care of
I've
myself, you
gone
know?
through
And
it
it's,
twice in my life. The first time I was 27, I basically realized I was a drug addict, alcoholic, and had to get sober. The second time was much later. It was emotional bottom. I went through a divorce. And so
yeah,
and that one is the one that really woke me up and made me start on this journey. This was about 5, 6 years ago, I guess, 6 years ago. And this was really what woke me up. It was like, what am I doing here? And why am I doing it? Because
yeah.
I did everything right. I did everything the world told me to do. And I'm still at bottom.
Yeah. And I think what's hard is as motivated, driven achievers, like we think we can just study our way out of this or work harder or network our way out of this. And
Dude,
that is
yes.
not the case. Like we
Or
actually just
masterclass our
need,
way out of it.
yeah, like there's no mastermind or masterclass or degree or networking opportunity or book. Like we have to just reevaluate and we have to do a little bit less, reprioritize, and be okay with doing less so that we can show up more in the areas that we want to show up in.
Well, so that's the irony of it. So the irony of it is that a lot of us might think whenever we get sober or we have a failure or we burn out that this is the end of our ability to conquest, our ability to be victorious. The party's over and we're just settling for like that, like slower farmer style life. No offense to any
Yeah.
farmers listening. But you know, yeah, I've thought like that every time I've gone through a process where I had to let go of my old tools and the old
Yeah.
way of doing things. I had to kind of be okay with like, okay, look, I have to do this, even if it means X. My experience, though, has told me that I actually excel more. And not only do I excel more, but I excel in this other dimension or another category that I'm so much more fulfilled by, you know. And I think you're living that the same way I am now, where we're living our calling as a result of that.
Yeah.
We went and we did this thing. We fell into a hole. I was talking with Chris Schembra the other day about like different types of stories that people relate to. And he said the number one story that humans as a rule will all relate to is it's called Man in the Hole, where somebody you're telling a story.
We've all been there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's because we all can relate. And there's a lot of people that right now are in that hole. And so they need to be around people that know how to get them out of it. And to be honest, you have to have people help you do it. You can't do it
100%.
alone. And that's a big thing, you know, and I think that's what's so beautiful about what you're doing is that you're creating a space and a movement where people can go to you. Like, and I think you're just scratching the surface. I have a feeling you're going to end up with a lot more people that are looking to you to help them. And you now have these tools and it's so cool. So you talked about childhood. Okay. So when, you know, I love to talk about who we were at 5 years old. That's all the weird kid. It's part of the Love Your Weird movement. But it's interesting enough. Think about it like this. At what age do you think you started to think differently about who you needed to be as it related to your brother or any external forces? Maybe it was your friend. What age would you say is kind of the earliest age you can remember that you started to do things differently because you knew that you became aware that, okay, I'm falling behind or I'm the ugly duckling, or what age do you think that was that you really started to become aware of that?
You know, my mom always jokes and says I was born mature. Like I've always just been a bit of an old soul. And if you can imagine,
my wife makes the same claim. She's like 80 years old. You know,
I'm actually a toned down version of my mother. So my mom is a very fun, outgoing, opinionated woman, very strong woman. So I come from that. And I mean, even at a very young age, I remember my brother, I vividly remember this. I was probably maybe like 6. My mom was a theater person. So she's a makeup artist, professional makeup artist, acting teacher. I grew up in the theater doing musical theater, eating my little McDonald's on the floor in the makeup room until my dad could pick us up. I mean, like just grew up in that environment. And I vividly remember going to see a show and it was intermission. And my brother was too chicken shit to go to the refreshment stand to like buy a Coke or whatever at intermission. And I was like, oh, please give me that money. I'll go do it. And then I'm standing at the front and some older guy behind us, like they start asking him if he wants something. And I was like, excuse me, I was here first, you know? And like, I've just been this sort of
I
like
love it.
pushy, opinionated, like strong person.
So you started to find your thing. Well, okay. So it's interesting you said 6 years old was when it started to change, because that's when it starts to change for most of us. Most of the studies at 5, 98% of us are still our authentic, original, most imaginative, like raw who we are. So there is a lot that I've learned through the years that can be uncovered specifically from that part of us, going deeper, looking at that inner child component. And so what I found is that when we really look at who was Erin at 5, okay?
Yeah.
So when you think about Erin at 5, what were you into? I mean, some people, they knew what they wanted to be when they grow up. Not everybody, but
not me.
Okay, good. But what were you doing? What was your play look like when you were making believe at 5? What was your make believe like?
Well, I was really into swimming. So I grew up in Southern California. So we all took swim lessons from like birth pretty much on. So I was really into swimming, loved the beach. As I said, my mom was a drama teacher and a professional makeup artist. So I remember we had this giant trunk full of like wigs and dresses and shields and just like random stuff. And so I was never really into like dolls and things like that. So I loved playing dress up. We would just like open up the trunk and there'd be all sorts of crap in there. We'd put on random costumes and make up different plays and shows. I also grew up in a neighborhood of like mostly boys. And then I had an older brother. So we were, and I mean, this was like pre-cell phones and pre-internet, you know? So we would play outside. We would build forts. We would have water gun fights. We would run through the sprinklers. We'd have hose fights where we're like hosing each other off. We would like, there was a little barranca by our house. We would go like, which is just sort of this like swampy, like gross place, but there were like crawdads in there. So we'd get little hot dogs and we'd put them in there and like fish for crawdads. We wouldn't eat them. We would just do it. But so lots of like outdoor fun play.
Loved adventure.
And
you loved swimming. Because you loved swimming, you loved adventure, and you grew up with a mom that said you can put on a costume to be anyone you want.
Oh, and a dad, like both my parents. I feel so lucky. Like, God, so many people.
My parents were like that too. I know.
With their parents, and like, I freaking love my parents. Like they are so awesome.
It's a gift and a minority for sure.
They always encouraged us that we could absolutely be anything that we set our mind to. And they never pushed us for like perfection. They always just said, as long as you are doing your absolute best, that's all we can ask for. And like in school, if your best was a C, they were fine with that.
Yes.
As long as they knew that you were working your ass off and trying the best you possibly could, then they were fine with that. So, I mean, they absolutely still are my biggest cheerleaders, my biggest supporters. And I think that's been a huge role in giving me a level of confidence that makes me think I can do and achieve anything. But, you know, but work was also a very important thing. My parents have an incredible work ethic. And so I'm sure I got part of that.
Yeah.
And they both came from nothing, like literally poor families, nothing. My dad lost his dad when he was only 15. My mom's dad was an alcoholic. My dad's mom was an alcoholic. I mean, so like all sorts of crap. They had nothing. And so they've had to work their asses off to create a good life for themselves. And they have. And so I think I definitely got that work ethic. But now I'm like, okay, it can't just be about work. Like there has to be, I mean, my husband gets mad at me all the time. He's like, Erin, all you talk about is work. And I'm like, but I love it. I'm passionate about what I'm doing. I'm excited about it.
Oh my God. Like, I mean, you have to literally run exercises in your marriage just to like see what do we talk about other than the dogs, the kids, work, or money. And you're like, wow, look at that weather out there. Like, it is hard. We have to make ourselves do it. But first of all, what a gift. My childhood was similar, where imagination was celebrated, dressing up was celebrated, being whoever you wanted to be was celebrated. So we're one of the lucky ones. A lot of the work I do is inventorying the stuff that kind of has to get cleared away first. There's some people that they can't even drop into the 5-year-old self because so much shit is blocking it from trauma. So I'm very cognizant of that going into the work I do. And it's a powerful thing, you know, because at the end of the day, each one of us, who we were. Like for you, it sounds like you were the adventurous swimming actress. Okay. That's
totally.
That's your weird, by the way. So you like a lot of the people that have my podcast, they're in that like 2% that fit the, family just came in. Hey guys, love you. So, you know, they're in that 2%. You're in that 2% with me. Right? We kept, because 98% of kids that identify with all these pieces, they are the ones that, over time, they say at 10 years old, only 30% identify with that imaginative original self. By 15, it's 12. By adult, it's 2. Wow. So we're some of the lucky ones who have caught it, and we're in that 2%. I believe we can grow that, because here's the thing. Almost every single person that's on this planet, they don't have to learn how to be innovative or creative or imaginative or authentic. They just have to relearn it, because people don't learn that stuff. They've unlearned it. Unlearning it is the problem, and the conditioning. And when you can peel it back, see, your story is a lot like mine. A lot of the racing and the comparing and the competitiveness was with me and my older brother. So as I've done the work of like unpacking my own childhood, my inner child, all that fun stuff, I've done everything you can imagine around that. As I've done that, I've come to realize that there was this thing that kept coming up, and it was actually more the older brother than the typical, it's the parents. Sounds like that was kind of the same for you, right?
It wasn't necessarily about keeping up with my brother, because I feel like I've always been kind of more academic than he was, and certainly more ambitious. Like sometimes I wish I could just be happy not like achieving all of these things. Like my brother is so content. He lives in Colombia. He sells stuff on eBay and Amazon and has like an online business and lives with his wife in Medellin, Colombia. Their rent is like $400 a month. Like he does not have to make a lot of money to live like an absolute freaking king down there. Yeah. And to me, it's never really been about the money. Like, don't get me wrong, money's great and I'll take more instead of less. Thank you very much. But like, it's never really been about the money. For me, it's more, I have become obsessed with like setting a goal that feels unattainable and then figuring out a freaking way to make it happen. That's right. Like that, I like thrive off that shit. It's so fun to me to set some goal that I just feel like feels so far out of reach, or and these don't have to be things like, you know, start the next Google, but like perfect example, I wanted to be a reporter. I always thought that would be so cool. And I didn't go to journalism school. I mean, I went to college, but like, and have a master's degree, but like, I didn't go to journalism school, but I'm like, I'm smart. I can write.
Do you really need to go to journalism school to read a teleprompter though? Am I right?
No.
I mean, come on now.
But I mean, I just started applying for gigs and I ended up getting a interview as a production assistant for this news organization in Sacramento. And I did not want to be a production assistant. Like I had no interest in like doing the camera and all of that crap. But I was like,
no, why would you? You're an adventurer swimming actress. You're supposed to be in front of the camera. Like, everybody knows that.
So I was like, whatever, I'll go. And as part of the interview, they said, you're gonna have to edit video on Final Cut Pro. Well, I'd never used Final Cut Pro in my entire life. And so I didn't even have it on my computer. So I literally was just Googling and watching YouTube videos of how to use Final Cut Pro, never actually used the real software. Yeah. Go to the interview, bullshit my way through the Final Cut Pro section. I got through like half of it. And then I was like, I don't know how to do anymore. I'm done. You know, I didn't finish it. But then the other half of the interview was a group interview. And I was like, I'm going to kill that part. And so, of course, get to the group interview. I'm Miss Personality. Like, I rocked the group interview.
Theater.
Yeah. Turns out I don't get the job, which is good because I didn't even want that job. But they're like, we really like you. And we have a position on the assignment desk that we think you'd be good at. Now, the assignment desk is where you answer the phones, not like as a receptionist, but where like news is coming in. People are giving you tips on things that are happening. You're also in charge of like telling the reporters and the photographers where they need to be.
I saw someone in a black hoodie in an alley. I think it might be the one.
Exactly. So you're dealing with that sort of stuff. And then, so I took that job and then that parlayed into working as a reporter. So it's like, just being okay with just going for shit and trying new things and like whatever it is, figuring out a way to like get in there and make it happen and do the thing that you want to do. Like I live for that stuff. And I could
Wow.
literally give you like 100 other examples of ways that I've just sort of like set these goals for myself and then I just figure out a way to make it happen, you
I love
know?
it.
So it's fun. I love that stuff. But it can also be exhausting and lead you to burn out. So, you know, that's always
It's
the
so it's all about really the balance of it, and also being cognizant of like what is it that you really are trying to achieve in this life, right?
yeah.
And I think it's obvious to me that you're not, even though you're working hard right now, I don't see you burning out the same way you would, because you're
No.
finally getting to be on stage.
I am,
And I think
but
that is
I
an interesting thing about your 5-year-old self that appreciates that.
100%. But I also think that because I burnt out so badly, probably 4 years ago now, I have gotten so much better at saying no to things and like putting boundaries around things. And I hate those words. I feel like they're so cliche, but it's true. I
But
mean,
they're there
like
for a reason.
one of my girlfriends was in town from Florida and I really wanted to see her, but the weekend she wanted to hang out. I was leaving that Monday morning for an early trip to go for a speaking engagement. I was like,
Mhm,
I can't hang out with you that weekend. Like I need to be home.
mhm.
I need to be doing my laundry and packing and resting and hanging out with my husband and my
Doing
dog
nothing. You gotta leave.
so
We leave
that,
0 time for nothing, you
yeah,
know?
so that
Nothing
I
time.
can then leave Monday morning feeling refreshed because as you know, when you're speaking, sure, you're only on stage for an hour, but you are giving
Absolutely.
so much during that hour. Like I got to be on my game. And so I said no to hanging out with her that weekend, which meant that there was only one evening that we were able to connect. And so instead of getting a whole weekend with her, I only got one evening, which sucked. But I was able to see her, but I was able to relax and be my best self the Monday morning. So it's small little things like
Dude,
that,
it's
just
interesting
making
you
better
mentioned that.
decisions.
I am telling you, getting into the real professional keynote speaking deal where you've gotta show up, like, you're showing up at 200%, basically.
They're paying you to
Yes,
be
maybe
dialed in.
300. Yeah, you're coming
Yeah.
in to draw hundreds, if not thousands of people out of their stuck, conforming, heavy situation. Like,
Yeah.
you don't get to come into that half-cocked. And so
No.
it makes you that has changed a lot for me. I mean, even just cognizant of like things that I eat, I'm healthy, like
Yeah.
and mentally being like, okay, I'm visualizing. I don't know about you, but I start visualizing what's going to happen on that stage like at least a month in advance. And I have to
Yeah.
stagger that because now I'm getting to where it's like 2, 3 talks in a week, right?
Yeah.
And so that is definitely something that has helped make me way more accountable. Because the other thing is like we're getting older. So like running
Yeah.
around the country doesn't feel like it used to. It's like we could just
Yeah.
drink a Red Bull and like it's like, okay, what's the price of the Red Bull?
Yeah.
And so I couldn't agree more. It is a beautiful thing though, because you become more evolved through this process.
Yeah. Yeah.
Becoming cognizant of burnout and doing the steps and tools it takes to do that, right? And I feel like you've given us a couple of those, but this is about an evolution, you know?
Yeah.
So give me, I'm going to go full screen for a second here. And you're going to give me what are some tools when I go full screen, just talk. So here we go. What are some everyday tools that people can take away today that they can apply immediately to their life that might help them? If there were one or two simple things that you would tell people
Yeah.
that they could walk away with.
Yeah. So one of my favorite ways to prevent and overcome burnout is what I call the Coco Chanel takeoff. So Coco Chanel, the famous French fashion designer, she has this great quote that says, when dressing with accessories, before you leave the house, take one thing off. So I always take that same approach with my schedule. Look at your schedule every week, maybe on Sunday, maybe Monday morning. Where is it heavy? And just take that one thing off. Like maybe it's a meeting or a call that could really just be an email. And there's a lot of those. Maybe this is the week that your kids carpool to soccer practice with somebody else. Like, what can you do to just take one thing off your schedule? It
I love that.
immediately lightens your load a little bit. Another thing I love doing is turning the music off when we drive. Now, I'm not talking about those like long road trips. Trust me, my car is my personal recording studio. I love singing at the top of my lungs in there. It's my 5-year-old musical theater girl coming out.
That's right. I
But
got to remember that. You're not just an actress, you're a musical
theater. Yeah.
Yeah, I
But
got to remember that.
you know, it's turning the music off for those 10, 15-minute trips to the grocery store, to work, to the gym, to the school drop off, whatever. Turn the music off. We are bombarded all day, every day by noise, by ads, by music, by all of these things. And it feels so weird, but just turn the music off. Enjoy
I love it.
those few minutes of silence. It just gives your body and like your nervous system a chance to like chill the heck out. And what's incredible is you'll start thinking about stuff that you haven't thought about, or you might come up with a solution to something that you've been struggling with. And because you finally have a moment of just quiet, you can think about it. Like those are just two super simple, easy things to do to really get a little bit of calm in your life. There's this great study that I talk about all the time from Gartner, which talks about proactive rest. And that's another thing I love, because so often we think of rest as something that we do to recover from exhaustion or burnout. They, in their study, talk about proactive rest being something you do to prevent exhaustion and prevent burnout in the first place. And they say, their study says that people that do proactive rest regularly have a 26% increase in their productivity. And these could be simple things like having 50-minute meetings instead of 60-minute meetings. Like give your team those 10 minutes back to just run to the restroom, get a coffee, like catch up on an email. Maybe you have meeting-free Fridays where you give your team that time to just catch up on the work from the week so that they can go into the weekend with a little bit less stress. So how can we proactively put small little pieces of rest into our day and our week? Because listen, one of these things is not going to change your life. It's not like that. It's small, consistent actions over time that really add up to a more peaceful, a more productive, a less stressful, a more balanced, and just happier life.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, I always say this, what are we even doing all this for? Ultimately, what we really want is to be happy, joyous, free, have some serenity, right? That's what we're all working for. That's what we're all trying to buy anyway. So we're all trying to buy that. So we work super hard so we have the money to buy that when really those things don't cost any money. And once you realize that, that's when the beginning of your evolution begins, because that's when you realize that like those things are not as tied to your work as you once thought.
Yeah.
And that's critical.
And I think so often, especially as like high achievers, it's like, okay, what book can I read to get over my burnout? Or, oh, is there a 3-day like thing I can go to and I'll be cured from my burnout?
Right.
No,
or a shot I can take. Right.
Yeah, it's not like that. And I compare it a lot to diet and exercise. We got to eat well and exercise pretty much every day for the rest of our lives if we want to stay healthy. We don't just work out one day and eat really well, and then all of a sudden we're like in amazing shape. We never have to do it again. It's the same thing with preventing and overcoming burnout and keeping our mental health healthy. It's small, consistent actions over time that equal results. This
Which
is
nobody
not
wants
rocket
to hear.
science.
We want a quick fix.
I
get it. But it is, you know, some of this stuff, it seems basic, but like some of the basic things that used to be every day in this new world we live in, we have to be reminded and we have to reprioritize.
Simple is not easy.
No, that's it. I say that all the time. So did I hear right, Erin, that you have a book coming out soon?
You did. Thank you. Yes. I have my very first book coming out.
Wow,
I believe it's going to be January 10th. So it's definitely going to be in January. I think the date is January 10th right now. It is called The Type A Trap: 5 Mindset Shifts to Beat Burnout and Transform Your Life.
That's such a good title. That's going to do so well.
Super exciting.
Yes, I can't wait to read it.
The Type A Trap. It's full of really practical, simple, easy to implement tools and tactics. It's none of the woo-woo stuff. If you want the woo-woo book, there are plenty of other people that have written those. That's not my jam. I am like what the hell do I do today when I
That's
go
it.
home?
So it's a manual. Good. So this
Yeah.
is the how-to manual. If you want the burnout, it's coming out in January. I love that. Obviously, it'll be available everywhere. Did you do a publishing deal, or are you self-publishing? How'd you end up doing
It's with Amplify. So it's a hybrid publisher.
I love it. Yeah. I love Amplify. I did my last book with them, obviously, and I liked them so much we ended up investing in it. So definitely. Yeah. I'm actually one of the investors with that.
I did not know this.
Yes.
Very cool.
Yes. So technically, if your book does good, I'll make a half of a penny or something. So no, I did it because I just love it. I'm passionate about it and I believe in them. And we have some exciting stuff we've been working on in the AI space for them. And you'll see that soon in the near future. Around more of the kid books. You know, they are one of the largest kid publishers.
I always forget that. Yeah.
Well, that's on purpose because you're not the audience for that. But, you know, that might be the next thing. I do see people coming out with kid books first as thought leaders. One of my friends did that through mascot books and Amplify. It was Tim the Robot Wizard. And he used AI to create all the visualizations. They're incredible. And so that's kind of what inspired us. But yeah, I love those guys. I'm excited about your book. That is so cool. Did you get erinstafford.com or did some crazy person try to steal that from you?
Oh no, I've had erinstafford.com for like 20 years. I've had that URL.
I had to pay someone, some terrorist out there that owns frankierusso.com. I had to pay them to get it back. It was
I have literally had it since I used to be a celebrity stylist in Hollywood. Then I had a jewelry company. Then I had this.
So that .com's been a lot of stuff. Yes.
That .com has had a whole evolution.
No way. I love it.
But yes, I have had that. Thankfully, erinstafford.com. You can find me there.
You know,
every iteration of my life, you'll be able to find me there.
There it is. And no matter what happens next, I'll still be found there.
Okay. Exactly.
Well, I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. This was awesome. Can't wait for to share this with the world. And again, if you're listening or watching, thank you for tuning in and joining us for another episode of the School of Why podcast. Until next time.
Thank you for having me.